If you are using this on a PC or Mac screen instead of a iPad to watch the video, you should use the little TV monitor icon that might be in the bottom right of the little video window on screencast rather than the full screen view, and this movie will display better for you. I'm going to address some questions that I've received about speeding up data entry for posting bills, accounts payable bills, etc. in this video. Just some quick tips and some explanation about the difference between web and using a desktop application like some of my users are using on remote. For one thing, I'm working in my own browser, which means that the browser has to go get information from our servers and bring it back to your browser. So one of the questions I received this morning is about setting up a vendor while you're doing data entry for entering bills, and that will help me also to explain the concept of using web versus remote. So if I click this button to post a new payables entry, you see that it took a moment to come in, but the reason it took a moment is because I chose for it to go ahead and load this drop down for me as it opened and load it one time instead of loading it every time I click the drop down. I have that choice when I'm programming. I think it's faster for this to be loaded each time I change a vendor. That one Austin Building told me it was had some POs, and we're going to address that in a minute. I'm going to click this one. But if I didn't tell it to load, I would see the word loading every time I clicked this drop down. So I've told it to load as it opens. So therefore, I don't have, I have chosen to do that instead of having an icon here for setting up any new vendors that aren't in the list. Because if I had that icon here, I'd have to tell this list to load every time you touch it, just in case you set up a new vendor. So my suggestion is, if you think you'll be setting up new vendors during data entry, is to go home, click the vendors list tab, and leave it open up here. Let it load your vendors and then leave that tab open. So if you're over here and you notice that in the drop down it's not in the list and you want to add it to the list, just close it, go back here to the vendors list and do the add new vendor. Now let's go back to the accounts payable. We're going to talk about posting bills that have POs here in just a moment, but I want to go over a couple of other things. So I'm going to choose a vendor. First of all, if the question was asked why you can't just select a PO when you're doing data entry on the regular accounts payable screen, and that's because we're offering a feature on the web that you can just create a bill from a PO and have everything filled in for you. If I decided not to offer that feature, which several people were wanting, then I could make it so that you put a PO number in here on this data entry screen. But I can't really do both without doing just all kinds of sort of complex and sort of confusing you. But we'll go over that. Let's just do, first of all, you'll notice I just want to go ahead and select Arroyo. That I get a message that says there are purchase orders for this. So what I should do if I have a stack of bills is just set that bill aside and continue to my next bill. And I'll know to go over and use the feature for posting from a purchase order. So let's select one real quickly. Austin Business Journal that doesn't have POs, and we'll continue. Now this little pause right here is instead of getting lots of pop-ups and alerts about various things while you're entering bills, this is taking care of it up front. It is going to the server and finding out everything for you about this particular vendor. Things like filling in a description I already had set up to drop in, the GL number to drop in, and when we get over to the PO, you'll see all of the things that it takes care of for you instead of having pop-ups happen right in front of your face. One question I had was about how, if I'm going to go ahead and select a date here for this invoice, and if I had set up for the vendor that these invoices are always due on the 15th or in 10 days, then the program would have gone ahead and calculated the due date for you. If I tab, and you should use tab instead of enter, after I let that date get in there and let it select the thing, the person was asking me about how the cursor landed at the end of the field. I think that happens in the due date, so they had to back up to type the due date. I think that happens if you use your enter key instead of your tab key, but see how it's completely highlighted, and I can just start typing in whatever new date I want to do, and I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the other question that's asked of me quite often is if you start typing on the remote, you're instantly on the computer and it can do autofill, but in web programs it cannot do autofill. So if I start typing a 7, there aren't any of those. If I start typing an 8, you are going to have to select which one you want. It'll start showing you and narrowing down to the ones, but it's not going to start filling in the rest of the numbers for you. So if you do not want to use your mouse, you are going to have to select the item that you want, because that's just how browsers behave. It has to know what it's entering and submitting. But I have found that if I use my down arrow key, I can do that and keep my hands on the keyboard, and then just use my enter key to select it, and that sometimes can help if you'd rather not use your mouse. I'm using my tab right now to just go over and do some things. Now, the other question that was asked was it copying a line or making a new line for this invoice. If you use the plus button to make a new line, it's going to make a brand new empty line, but if you use the copy icon, it's going to copy this record so that a whole bunch of the stuff that you have, and it's going to take a moment because we are a job costing and etc. type program, to check whether copying this additional line for $45 is going to cause anything. But notice how it copied my invoice date and my due date because I used the copy icon rather than the plus icon, so it will copy things in. Another question is about, notice that I have to use a submit button on the web, and that's so that the submit actually causes it to check all these fields to make sure I have all of the data in that is required before posting a bill. So we have to do the submit first before we decide what to do with this bill. And what this has told me is that this is too long, and I need to go change that in my subscription because see, it cannot be more than a certain number of characters, and because I let it drop in from my subscription, I just made that one up a minute ago. I need to actually probably go and change it so you can't put more than 32 characters in that drop-in description there over for the vendors. So now we'll try to submit that again. And that's what, like I said, what the submit is about, is that it's checking those fields before it gives you the options of what to do, what to post those, and how to post those. And we do have various places for posting those, and this is why I don't have the buttons right on this screen, is because I have to do that submit and check things. So if I want to post payment later, post as unpaid to pay later, etc., I will click the button and then it will do what is necessary for posting that. I'm actually not going to post this bill, and I'm going to exit this screen. I'd like to address the fact that I got information about Arroyo and the new feature we have for posting bills from a PO, and my bill in front of me says it's for this job and for Arroyo, and I'm going to continue, and it's going to find that purchase order for me, the purchase orders for this job and this vendor, and there's a create button. And the program is doing so much checking, it's telling you there's pop-up notes, and you can cancel this and look at your pop-up notes, or you can look at them on the next screen. But notice how the open amount of this PO was $722.48. There had already been some costs posted to it. Now what this is doing is checking this vendor for all kinds of things and alerts so that you don't get the pop-ups while you're doing data entry. So just let the, remain calm and let the program just take care of all of that. Notice that it's found that this vendor's insurance is expired, workman's comp, so all of that doesn't have to pop up. If I decide I do want to deduct some general liability insurance, it's going to just make the fields for me. If I want to look at what this is about or outstanding waivers, I can, and I can collapse that box. And because we're doing it from a PO, out in the field, the project managers, etc., can give you some approval notes when they approve that the work is done, and that's a whole nother feature. And why we're creating from POs is that people out in the field can let the bookkeeper know that the work is done, This is also starting to head towards a paperless for various people that want to go paperless and not have bills submitted by subcontractors or etc. And they're only going to pay with POs. But notice that everything is filled in for me. There might be a different invoice date, or I might want to enter a different invoice number, but that amount that's remaining, I can change that, $722.48, if I don't want to put the whole amount to the PO. I can drill down and look at what's happened with the PO, but all of this is filled in for me, which is a pretty fast data entry thing, especially if you move yourself towards letting the project managers approve work is done, letting the bookkeeper just pull up all the POs that have been approved and create payables invoices from those, and move towards paperless, which will speed up a whole bunch of your time, is just telling subs, we're going to give you a PO, we're going to pay from the PO, and we don't necessarily care about whether we get an invoice from you. When we finish a stage of the job, that's going to be a whole bunch of other videos that I'll be addressing. But maybe this helps you understand some of the ways, instead of getting all the pop-up alerts, we're using POs, we're using stuff to pull data information in front instead of popping up at you while you're posting bills. So maybe that'll help you grasp some of the concepts of what's happening with the web. Please feel free to continue asking questions or making your suggestions as we continue through developing for the web, which is where I have to go for the future. Fighting and kicking, I'm going. So talk to you later. Bye.